I'm going to introduce our first speaker online, Jana REVEDIN. Okay, it's an honor and a pleasure, of course, to present Jana. Jana REVEDIN is an architect, a theorist, and a writer. She's in architecture. She studied architecture and urbanism at Belgrano University at Buenos Aires, at Princeton School of Architecture, and the Milano Polytechnic University, and she taught at the Institute of Architecture and Urbanism of Venice as an assistant to Aldo Rossi. She teaches as an associate professor of full professors in different universities, like both University in Berlin, University of Umeå, and the Blekinge Institute of Technology in Karlskrona, Sweden. And since 2016, he's a full-time professor at the École Spéciale d'Architecture in Paris. She's also a member of the research laboratory, LOR, dependent of the CNRS, the Center for Scientific Research in France. And she's the founding president of the world widely recognized Global Award for Sustainable Architecture. And she served at the UNESCO as delegate to the UEA Commission of Research and Education. Finally, she's member of the board of director of the School of Architecture and Science of Bordeaux. I have the pleasure to work with him in this board of directors. So, Jana, it's up to you.
Thank you very much for having me as your inaugural speaker this morning to this very meaningful Congress. I have read the participants and I'm thankful and honored to be with you this morning. Thank you also to be with the faculty and the staff and the students of ENSAP Bordeaux, a school that I'm very fond of after 3 years of being in the board. I will match, I think, quietly nice in your teaching and learning by new paradigm approaches, because I'm fighting for an active pedagogy that is not new, but that is 100 years old. Let me take you through a little voyage through my actual activity and, of course, my research and pedagogical aims. Actually, since 5 years, I'm professor at École Spéciale d'Architecture. It's the smallest and also the eldest school of architecture of France. I was called there to give a new life in terms of pedagogy to this small but very selected school that is not for French students only. It is exactly the contrary. It invites students and scholars from all over the world, mostly from the global south, to come to Europe and to get a certain methodology and then to get back to their countries and change their political and social actualities and problems. So I'm very happy to have come to Paris since 5 years and to be a little bit more included in the French and yes, hexagonal discussion. First, I had, as Carlos said, taught more in Italy, Germany, my home country, Sweden, and the Nordic countries on their own. My theory and methodology I have developed since 20 years from Sweden on, a radical design methodology. It goes in 4 steps. I think I will explain it to you in one final project that you will see at the end of this conference. My research fields are, I claim that the urban sustainability and architectural sustainability are not born yesterday or in the 70s, but 100 and more years ago with the reformatory Bauhaus movement. And I will make you participate in a little promenade through these research aims. Now I'm not able to go ahead in the presentation. I don't know why. Dear Teddy, help me. I found the way. I found another way. Perfect. So as you see, the timeline after the closure of the Bauhaus by the German Nazi political oppression is going in many different ways around this globe, from Germany after the Bauhaus, and still during the Bauhaus, we have the Berlin building expositions that try to claim the realization of the experimental findings of the Bauhaus. Then we drop over to Turkey, the then most liberal country in Europe, to the USA with Harvard, of course, and Black Mountain College and Chicago, back to Germany with Ulm School of Architecture, then spreading to the global south from India, the Americas, and with a very beautiful positioning in France with Patrice Doard, our friend, in the late 70s, now spreading to China, to India, and to the Southern Americas. This is a timeline that shows that architecture is not about concurrence, but about community, about synergy of interdisciplinary knowledge, and not an elitarian solitude practice. This is why 15 years ago, my own practice, after leaving Aldo Rossi at his too early death in 1997, I formed my own office in Venice and in Austria nearby. But after 10 years of doing my own profession, I thought I have to create and fight for this community sense of making architects fighting together for a new ethics. And I founded the Global Awards for Sustainable Architecture. Today, we are in our 15th year. It is my own battle. We are not supported by anyone, only by UNESCO and by my very close partner, the Cité de l'Architecture et du Patrimoine in Paris. And since 15 years, we built up a 75 persons, colleagues, community. We define architecture as an agent of empowerment, of self-development, and of civic rights. And since then, it is nearly incredible. The Pritzker Prize, that was still when I was a young architect, considered as a star architect award, now is fishing in my pond, and still we are already at our 6th Global Award laureates that are then becoming Pritzker Prize laureates. This is, of course, a change of paradigm, which is not anymore reversible. We have become the new world of the new ethics in architecture and in urban planning and in landscape planning, of course. What do I do with those laureates, with this community? We write, of course, together with Marie-Hélène from the Cité de l'Architecture. We write on them, we write monographies of their work, mostly unknown work, and we present them to the global scene. But I also, as a theoretician, I'm very interested in writing with them. Normally they say, I cannot write and I don't have the time to do this, so I tempt them to put down what is their methodology, which is their visions, which is their needs and their necessities. And the very last one, l'architecte et l'existant, building with what is already there, just came out this month in the libraries. If you wish to have a look, of course, do it. But I also can send you, if you're interested, the English version of my paper that is practically the content of this lecture. Not only writing with them and teaching with them and researching with them, no, we also do for the fun of it, because architecture in the end is the most beautiful profession in this world. We do projects together. And this year I had the chance to be the curator of the young Ile-de-France Biennale of Architecture and Landscape. And I had the chance to invite 3 of my laureate colleagues, one from the Americas, one from the Orient, and one from Asia, to pronounce that we have still land inside when we think and wish to find solutions for a resource-efficient life. From the Americas, Rosana Montiel, she will, and I asked them before starting to do any kind of one-to-one project in the Castle of Versailles, which are your needs and what is your battle? Where are you fighting and what are you fighting for? Rosana Montiel stands up for the seas, and as an answer to this problematic, shows us how to upcycle plastic waste as a finishing element, in her case for floor tiles. For the Orient, Amar Kamash, he claims that we deplete and we rub his beautiful desert landscape, and he will reuse concrete formwork wood, nobilitating it by very fine and very small marquetries of desert basalt. And the third, and maybe the most acclaiming installation from Asia, Bonsa Improntada, will tell us how to use other living elements for architecture. He uses animal, for the first time in the world, animal dung as a building material. So have a look. I don't show you much. This is a 3D, but you know, 3D installations are never as good as the reality. The opening was an acclaiming by at least 600 journalists. This is the Elephant Theater that is the most aimed by Instagram. Have a look at it. And nearly every day we have large groups visiting this first building done by elephant dung bricks. And of course, in the evenings, in the morning, Versailles children, they use this as their playground. You see Rosana Montier from Mexico on her beautiful recycled tile pavement and building this fishing net and showing that plastic is not only the plastic that we find on the shores, but also the plastic of the fishing nets, which are drowning on the grounds of all of our oceans. And these fishing boats are the reason. International extreme fishing is the reason for this horrible depletion of our oceans. Look at the beautiful tiles that she now already uses in her community projects in Mexico. And then third of it, and he came late because searching of the horizon, actually in times of pandemic and terrible wars, maybe the most difficult. Look at the beautiful wall of Amar Kamash with his intarsium of desert stone. We built it in the very last days before the opening. And here is the little stairway to gain horizon in nowadays architecture and urban discussion. Now I take you very shortly into my theoretical fundaments. 100 years ago, we invented three things already: urban ecology, interdisciplinary active pedagogy, and social empowerment. Architecture as an agent of social empowerment. Just go with me through this little voyage, and then I will show you one typical project of participatory planning in urban neighborhoods that I do with my students and with my doctoral students, and of course already now with the generation of my assistants. Urban ecology, what is this? We defined it 150 years ago already. Let us remember that this concept of sustainability comes from botanists. Don't cut more trees that can grow at the same time. It's a very simple mathematical equation. We did not get the sense of this equation up to today. Very used word of resilience. Urban growth was, by geographers of the 18th century and 19th century, defined as very simply the broadness of territory that a city and urban implementation needs to be self-sufficient. Also this, a mathematical equation that was not understood up to practically today. Sociology was created, and I know that by our participants, we have a lot of interdisciplinary specialists like psychologists, sociologists, politologues, anthropologues. In the beginning of last century, we needed new sciences because after the movement of industrialization of Central Europe and the northern states of America, we needed to understand the human soul and the human ways of interacting. So Ferdinand Tönnies, together with Max Weber, the creator of social sciences, he will find this essential dimension of community, which has several dimensions, but the demonization, the denominator of a fruitful perseverance is the unity of human will. Our community, as we are sitting here in this lecture hall, could move the world if we are all wishing to do the same will. Very much more architectural becomes Max Weber when he says the condition for good urbanity is neither density nor size, but just the social mixture. And we get out of these findings new city utopias. In England, first of all, they have good, very excellent rules, harmony with nature. We need to meet the rural migrants because they're coming, invading Europe to fill the industrial plants. And we want a hygienic, reformatory community life. Yet the urban form was not the right one. They tried to place these new centers of community out of the existing cities, and still they were in a design language that was from another century, as you can see by unique tissues, unique furniture, unique interiors. The revolution was done in the German Deutscher Werkbund in the same time. They discovered with Peter Behrens or Bruno Taut the new materials. And new materials are always the toys for architects to experiment new forms of living and new forms of space. This was, of course, the concrete, and this was, of course, the large span glass, crystal glass that was invented and imported from America in this moment. It was not only architecture, it became an urban idea to place new settlements not outside the cities in the famous banlieue, but inside the city halls that were former industrial plants or former other kinds of urban voids. And here we have the first town plannings that are respecting the needs of the immigrants. The first Martin Wagner, the first city philosopher, city scientist that claims that the sanitary green of the cities are the real health and well-being aim of every city. He will become, and this is by fortune and by a chance, the first city planner of Berlin, and will have the possibility to build together with Bruno Taut the first large housing and production areas inside the city of Berlin, and then further on in Magdeburg, in Cologne, in Hamburg. A very beautiful movement, and he will always claim this first line: don't build cities for darlings, don't build cities for spoiled children, but for everyone, for every user, and for a democratic majority of our population. These 6 points that are formulated nearly at the end of the Bauhaus period in 1931 at the Siam in Zurich from 4 of the major protagonists of the Bauhaus, Walter Gropius, his second wife Ise Frank, Siegfried Gideon, the famous from Zurich theorist of architecture, and Laszlo Moholy-Nagy. See these 6 points, if we could only have followed them over the last 100 years, our cities would be much better planned and much more livable. Dense organic growth, urban gardening as an active use of urban green, mix city of workplace, commercial space, and social housing. Orientation has to follow climatic influences: wind, sun, snow, use of rainwater for cooling and solar energy for heating. We are not yet at other resources of sustainable cooling and heating, but already it is a beginning, and research into light, flexible, hygienic, recyclable, and low-cost structures and materials. This is the architecture for everyone, not for a selected elite. And it was not stopping there in formulating these concepts in 6 points. It was also the experimentation in the Berliner Bauausstellungen that Martin Wagner, the urban city planner, could organize in Berlin around the Funkturm. It was 4 years of ongoing expositions. Look at the first house of 3, passive solar energy use from Martin Wagner. Look at all the beautiful architects that were participating in this movement, and then 1 year exactly later had to go into immigration because Hitler in 1933 overtook the government of Germany. In this same year, in the summer, the last Siam takes place before Second World War, and there's a young Swiss architect, his name is Le Corbusier, and he will take over the place in this Athens, called Athens Siam, because it's a paquebot. It's a boat that goes from Marseille to Athens, and he's nearly alone because all the German and Netherlandish and Danish and so on colleagues, they need to look for very urgently to go into exile. He will pronounce exactly the contrary of the reformatory 6 goals. 3 points: zoning has to regulate spaces between living, working, and free time. The car-friendly city comes up, and not anymore the human-friendly city. And people are forced to live in machineries of residential buildings. Of course, he will create and cause the biggest errors of urban planning of the 20th century. What happens to those in exile? Bruno Taut and Martin Wagner, together with Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky, they find exile in Istanbul, the then most liberal place in Europe. The couple of Gropius, let us remember that Ise Frank is Jewish, from Jewish family. They will find exile in the new founded Harvard School of Architecture that Joseph Hadnert, and a former student of the Bauhaus, will be leading. And there they will install, together with a small group of teachers, assistants, let's say the hardcore of the Bauhaus, a new school of architecture that is presenting these interdisciplinary active pedagogy that I am still today fighting for. It is, and this is of course to be said in France, it's the death of the Beaux-Arts system, and it proved to be the way of including a student, his talents and his interests and his needs into the pedagogical process instead of teaching from top down. Who is the author? Where does Walter Gropius get this idea of the active pedagogy? It is again not an architect or an urban planner. It is a botanist and geographer, Patrick Geddes, who will write in 1912 one totally outstanding work from his normal practice and research. It's called The Mask of Learning. Listen to what he says. Education happens before all through ourselves, establishing real context with the real context, its problematics, its work and experience. And this is what Walter Gropius will adopt and practicate in his Bauhaus school, first in Weimar, then in Dessau, and he will combine it with the most humanist and oldest theory we have in architectural learning, and by Vitruve. And you just get up to take in your hand a pencil when you have been educated, acquainted with many other sciences, many other savoir-faire, many other ways of doing, of practicing, and of creating an architectural space. In the teaching, in the very simple way of how to decline these two routes into a weekly program, you see the 7 groups of materials that are then known, and they are new and old. Today we would add maybe, of course, the 3D spray techniques that we are discovering today with the universities of Barcelona, of Stuttgart, and of Copenhagen, which is cellulose, fibers, and earth, and they will, I promise you, in the next 10 years, change totally our architectural doing and spatial conception. But this is how, at 1919, Walter Gropius plans his weekly teaching. And look at the teaching plan in a week. Much more things happen on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, because we play theater together. We do singing and opera together. We do sports together. A whole new way of proceeding, learning by living architecture all together. For all is the general topic of the teaching. We have to create theaters for all. Teaching in information and education has to pass through all levels of society. Together with Erwin Piscator and Bertolt Brecht, he develops the total theater. Oskar Schlemmer will develop the triadic ballet, the use of the physical form and the physical dimensions and the movement in space for all. Bruno Taut, together with the wife of Gropius, Isi Frank, will develop the ergonomic house for all. And this has a sense of emancipation. The woman shall minimize the time employed for boring works as household and cooking and washing to be able to work in a profitable way in her own new careers that are built up. Self-sufficient gardening for all. Walter Gropius calls Leberecht Mege, famous gardener and landscape designer, to his school and says he claims for a garden that is autosufficient for the family in all building, social and work building areas in Germany. The garden of an active use is not only planned, but realized. Look at those schemas of gardens of 300 to 400 square meters. And a family in that time means 10 to 12 persons, and they live most exclusively on the vegetable and the fruits that they can create in their gardens. New tools, photography, film, collage, all invented in this moment, and we cannot claim today to be so inventive. If you remember that 100 years ago, we didn't have a cinema, we didn't have a photograph, and we didn't have any kind of publicity in graphic design. This was also the invention of the Bauhaus School. To stop, of course, in material research for all, we invented new materials, much more economic and ecologic materials than there were on the market, like trioline for floors, magnesite for the floors, creed, self-supporting brick ceilings to create the flat roofs, of course, ergonomic interiors. And in the case study projects of the Bauhaus, they, of course, try to use the most of the 6 points to prove that this way is more salutable and more hygienic and more, of course, beautiful also in an urban surrounding. Normally and erroneously, in the world from the Bauhaus, we only remember 3 emblems, design emblems. This is why, ironically, the Bauhaus is understood as an elite school of design, only because these emblems have become so famous. The Bauhaus lamp, the Bauhaus coffee and tea set, by the way, designed by one of the first Bauhaus architect women, and the club chairs, and the then ongoing furniture by Marcel Breuer. But Walter Gropius, before leaving the Bauhaus, he will say, this is not the right understanding of my school. It was not about style or system or dogma or canon or recipe, and it was much even less about fashion. This teaching became vital as soon as it is not attached to form, but searches behind any changeable figure, the fluid of life itself. The third invention of that epoch, 100 years ago, seems short: social empowerment. What are the minorities that Walter Gropius calls into his newly created Bauhaus? The minority of the women. It's the first school in the world that accepts women in the career of architecture and urban design. This is his sentence is one of the reasons for the affluence of many, many young women to this school. Architecture is a science, an art, and a craft at the service of society. Remember that after World War I, there were very few young men on the market, but many, many young women. They all had lived the war, and the service of society was a lived dimension. We created a lot of young women architects, photographers, or designers, or textile designers, but they are forgotten. If I would not give you 4 names and 4 photographies, you would not remember one of them. And in fact, in 23, in the middle of moving to Dessau, Walter Gropius has to accept that men are still frightened to accept talented women. And I'm fighting for making men accept talented women still today. Maybe the most important legacy is left by Ise Frank, his wife. She was not an architect, but a journalist and writer. And she created the motto that less is more, that then later on was stolen by Mies van der Rohe coming to Chicago. But this less is more, I think today has to be replaced by better with less. We have 10 times the population on this planet. We have 100 times worse ecological situation in its geography and climatology. We don't only need to do more with less, but we have to do much better with less. And I am convinced that the new generation of architects is very, very aware of this mission. For me, you can discuss this later on in the 2 days that are before you. Sustainable living space needs to become slow and silent and have a new dimension of interactivity. I think the slowness is the major quality to meet people, to talk with people, to have active players on the ground, in the field. Already Jane Jacobs tells us liveliness and variety attract more liveliness, deadness and monotony repel life. The slowness, as Hartmut Rosa says, or asks, is not doing ever more things in ever less time. And in my French writings, I claim to this slowness, because time is not money, time is free, and only haste is costly. It has to be silent. I live in Venice, Italy. And as the pandemic started, we regained our silent city. We could listen to every bird's song and every lightest movement on the roads. Silent offers protection and comfort, and in the end, enchantment. We can hear our own words in silence. And we have to, through silence, rediscover our cultural patterns of every context, our symbols, our archetypes in those open work processes that I claim for architecture. Today, as did Aldo Rossi, my master, already in the 70s, the biography of a city is written analogously between the lines in a fabric of feelings. And here, Michael van Dorst will like this, a psychologue, first in architecture theory, sees the word feelings written in a serious architecture text. Umberto Eco will open in the same period the open work theory, and he will call for this indeterminate, those processes open to all sorts of operative choices and interpretations. This opening to the clients, the users, the people's incarnation in architecture. Architecture and urban space changes through our own use and life of it. And of course, the beautiful dimension of having interactive spaces, vita activa, which we are rediscovering after the pandemia, recreates new life rhythms, new uses and flows, enables synergies with nature and with its resources. And we don't have to be frightened. Hannah Arendt tells us, for the things we have to learn before we can do them, we learn by doing them. Vita activa calls us to be, again, responsible of our own experiments and of our own discoveries. And the pressure needs to come from the base, states Henri Lefebvre in The Production of Space. And today, Bruno Latour, our wonderful colleague from France, he don't give us any excuse. Our work as architects, planners, and landscapers is just to design those commons, because everything is already there. So thank you for your attention for this theory little walk through some last century. And now I present you in the last minutes that I have one of my Radicant community projects. I already told you it's 4 steps. It's very simple. Methodologies have to be simple that people use them. If not, they get tired of them. We have transdisciplinary mapping and co-programming. It takes more than half of the time that an invest in any design process. Then we start to co-design, of course, taking the resources of our co-programming and mapping products. And then finally, we try to co-construct on-site with local resources and local manpower and knowledge, and of course partners. This is one project that took us 5 years together with undergrad students from Sweden. It was 4 times a semester that we invested in only the mapping and the co-programming. And we have had one very simple, the most simple idea to give a re-enchantment to this ex-quarry of northern Cairo, where the Coptic minority came in the 1950s and 60s and built their own city by their own hands and by an economy that they invented, not having any. They recycle all what is waste in this 25 billion inhabitant city of Greater Cairo. First step needs always to be that the community calls us. If you don't have any need, you don't have to go. I know that there's a very stupid fashion of poverty architecture around architecture schools in the world. Please avoid these kind of going somewhere where you're not called to. It is senseless, and it creates expectations which are then obviously not fulfilled. The transdisciplinary mapping is based on urban and architectural analysis, classical ones like Lynch or Rossi or Christoph Alexander or Jacobs or Gale, but also on modern economic science analysis like SWOT or stakeholder analysis. We spend lots of weeks in mapping, most of all in informal settlements. We don't even have a map or a cataster. We map the physical environment by many criteria. We draw it down. Normally the inhabitants, they're surprised because they have never seen a plan of their informal settlements, but also we map their human conditions. And this is depending on every site where we go. It can be a long list, it can be also a very short list, because maybe the human conditions and needs are so clear that it is quite easy to cap them. In this case, the co-programming was based on this mapping. We were called by the Coptic industrials and the Coptic church to give a new quality for their public spaces. In 50 years, they built a city which is like a medieval city, working commercial and residential city on the same time. In the ground floors, there are industries for recycling of any kind of materials, plastics, textiles, timber, metal, glass, paper, copper, bones, bread, and so on. But it gives work to 200,000 inhabitants. So it is an enormous economic and ecological circular movement. The simple people on the street, they say, I just dream to see my street lighted and clean. So this was the very first step after many interviews and many on-site researchers. Maybe we just light the streets to make it more safe and to make them more clean and to make them accessible for much more members of the community. So the design laboratory with local and of course international colleagues starts co-designing with what? From all these materials that are already recycled in our little garbage collector city. We had to choose the metal plates because they were the most resistant, the most light, and the most cheap to do design of self-built lanterns. Bijoy Jain from Studio Mumbai, one of my Global Award winner, comes great for granted to help in these informal settlement and doing recycled design that he is a specialist on. We developed 2 project aims: gender development by improvement of technical, artisan, and entrepreneurial skills to the Women's Association, young women that are supported to be more informed and more autosufficient in the area, and an importance of right tech. We propose to install zero running costs and net independency by photovoltaic energy, which is not so much wished by the local stakeholders. They say, we don't need energy in any way, we steal it. But we say, listen, if someday the energy of Egypt is cut, you will be, at least for the lighting, autosufficient. All right, they said. So let's do it. Let's go on in this process. The first lamps are produced, the first light is tried on, the first placements of these lanterns on the main square of the area of the little city are individuated. The terrace where we need to build our solar cell little power station, and we co-construct these first lamps. We start, of course, to find cultural and social threats. The young women, they don't want to touch metal. We are in a Coptic minority, but we are still in Africa. So we have to convince them to touch metal. It is not biting them. And how do we do it? By me and my students and my assistants, women assistants, sitting there with them and showing them that they cannot be hurt. And even at home, they are not threatened for using a male material as metal. Another cultural threat, the bishop, who is not only the religious, but also the legal head of the community, will find in the highest moment of the Arabic Spring, and he's under pressure in all sides, he will say, I'm frightened. Your solar cells will burn my village. So please don't install the solar cells. He is accompanied by an engineer of Ain Shams University. I am not a solar cell engineer. And together with my architect colleague from Cairo, I say, what can I do to not make this process now stop by this presumption? And he says, you sign a paper. Please just sign a paper. And we install the solar cells on my personal responsibility. But of course, solar cells are not burning. So we are lucky not to have any accident in the village. The women conquer public space. Look at the views, look at the sights and the views of the young male in the community. Normally in an Arabic community, women that do not have to use public space for activities, but they are useful now for the community, and they install their own built lamps, and even the solar batteries are working, which is also always a little bit a surprise. A fifth step in this project is installed by itself. I'm not doing anything. I'm becoming obsolete as an architect. A catalyst chain reaction of policies through the pressure of the Arabic Spring, and the whole Cairo that was not lit from 5 o'clock in the afternoon by a civil war government. The women of the area said, we build now our own lanterns, smaller, for our own kitchens, for our balconies, because we light up our village. And we are the only one that have light in this war year. And production of these lamps are now financing, by a circular economy, more street lamps that are installed from road to road. This project made, I have to say, the voyage through the whole world, and gave hope to these kind of community energies and community will. They're traveling, these little lanterns, from museum to museum to show some idea for a future of cities. A little lantern made a long way, and this is why I claim to do the step from less is more to better with less. And thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Jana, for this fantastic conference, in which it was very, very interesting the way you show actual concepts as social empowerment or interdisciplinary pedagogy that you show in this example at the end of your intervention, how they are also concerned by the reflection and the action during the Bauhaus period. I remember a book I also, to me, was very important from Anatole Kopp when he said, quand le moderne était in cause et pas en style, when the modern was in cause, militant cause, and not just, style. So I think it's very, very interesting this way you show this new attitude, with the concept of slowness or interdisciplinarity or the empowerment, which also was present in this militant attitude that an architect have to have, and it was so clear in the examples you show. So thank you very much. Perhaps we can exchange with if somebody have a question, perhaps to intervene, please.
My question was about would you say that also there was some exemplarité éthique, the sense of ethic about ecology in some major works that has been done back in the 60s. I talk notamment, I was thinking about Gordon Cullen, Townscape, but also Edmund Bacon, the design of cities. He dedicated 40 years of his life to design a sustainable city, Philadelphia, and he issued this, edited this magnifique work, major book called Design of Cities, and he was un grand pédagogue, comme on dit. He did about new pedagogy of designing new cities. So Edmund Bacon, Gordon Cullen, but also Donald Appleyard, back in the 60s, the same period, we have cette grande littérature, the big literature about designing with sustainability, designing with ethics, with social ethics, and with social engagement. And about Egypt, Hassan Fathi, construire avec le peuple. He was a major university teacher, but also he designed these cities. We talk with our students all the time about Hassan Fathi. He was a pioneer in this field, I think. And also I was thinking about Ralph Erskine, maybe a major designer, planner, architect. He designed this new neighborhood from recycled material, recycled technology, and with eco-design, participatory design. Maybe some people know about the neighborhood called Byker, the neighborhood of Byker in Newcastle cities. I visited when I was a young researcher I visited this in England. I visited this. That was in the late 70s, early 80s. So if you go to Byker, this just like la petite couronne autour de Newcastle City, we can see this major design and all la pensée de Ralph Erskine qui a été aussi dans la littérature sur le sujet de l'écologie bien après. Thank you very much.
Okay. Is there any question?
In fact, maybe Carlos, I very quickly answered that is a very beautiful statement. Thank you for our French colleague. In fact, I can only start from my own context and my own history. And I was born into a family that was actively fighting into the Weimar Republic and for the Bauhaus. So this is my roots. And from there, I can put together these kind of legacy. But I know that in France, for example, the movement, the hygiénique, was on the same time a very strong and par exemple, for example, Auguste Perret, he was inside this movement like other architects in the southern areas in Lyon and even in Bordeaux. This ethic call was all over Europe and all over the then Western, let us say, countries. And in the 60s, and it's interesting for all of you maybe to research how was in my country 100 years ago this positioning for an ethic mission of architecture and the city as a place of empowerment for a broader democratic truth of society. In the 60s then, after World War II, this counter movement to the international style that is wrongly interpreted by Johnson in the United States and ruins all our movements of reformatory modernism is evident. Kevin Lynch in the United States, or Jane Jacobs, or Laurie Baker after Hassan Fatri in India, or Aldo Rossi and Giancarlo De Carlo here in Italy. It is a kind of re-getting to the roots of a local site and its spirit against having international model projects thrown down to any continent by any climatic situation and any geographical truth. So it is most interesting, and I can only call all of you scientists and scholars and students and assistants sitting there, make your own little legacy of your country and your great personalities that maybe are mostly forgotten nowadays because we did not recall them in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, as the Bauhaus luckily was recalled through the activity in Harvard and in Chicago. So that's a good starting point, I think, for this symposium. Thank you, Carlos, for the time.
Okay, thank you very much, Jana. So was. The time's okay. So if there's no more question, we are going to say thank you very much, Jana, and we will be in touch to how this conference will work in the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carlos.